Are you ready? Ready, she says. Okay, oh gosh. Self-portrait. I look for angles, search the shadows, seek the curving lines. Pencil moves as I outline the shapes. My chin is almost pointed. It misses the complete move into triangularity with a slight squaring off at the tip. Where did this chin come from? Neither of my parents has a chin like this. My father's is graced with a deep dimple right in the center. I haven't seen his dimple in a long time, though. It's hidden by his beard. I wonder if he grew the beard to cover what he thought was a weak chin. My chin is small but not weak. Interesting how that phrase describes me. Small but not weak. I've weathered illness, divorce, single parenthood, losses, poverty. I've learned to jump into life feet first. Such a pointed chin. It reminds me of the pointed remarks I make about nearly every topic and person I encounter. It calls to mind the sarcastic tone of, "Oh, thank you. I really love a full-blown fight right before breakfast," and other angry speeches. The squared-off tip suggests the bluntness of comments like, "You're having a fit because you don't want to share that toy, not because it might get broken." If I can get the next angle right, the shift where chin line meets jawbone, I can capture the focused determination that orders my life. There, just a little sharper and I'll have it. I move the pencil past the jawline to outline the cheek area. I don't have model quality bones, but they're a gift from my grandmother and her mother. There's a link between those bones and the rigid skeletons of feminine control in my family. My great-grandmother lived with an abusive, unyielding husband for over 50 years. She learned to give in, to keep improper aspects of herself hidden. Her daughter picked up where she left off, with a few crucial changes. Despite her soft and gentle appearance, my grandmother was determined not to repeat her mother's mistake, and so married a man who kept his mouth shut. She practiced controlling people, situations, finances, anything within her reach. My mother learned that lesson well, but she modified the skeleton a bit. Mother always chose men who had a little bit of mystery about them, or men whose intellectual talents exceeded hers. She didn't want total control of her men. She was content to control her children with tears and anger. I took the reins of power from my mother, but altered my hold to effect a different kind of control. I learned the strength of words, the ability of a well-aimed retort. My cheekbones look especially harsh when I'm angry. I don't like the meanness those angles imply. Instead of drawing in the bitter fights with my ex-husband, I want to capture the tenderness of my cheek pressed against the cheek of my newborn daughter. I draw the line from cheek to temple. I'm glad I'm at the forehead. It seems kinder than the sharp bones I've drawn so far. I have a high, wide forehead, quite a contrast to my chin. Both of my parents and all of my children share this feature. We also share the love of thinking, of reading, of creative endeavor. My stepfather used to remark that a high forehead was a godlike sign of intelligence. I always liked his interpretation. He and I shared that physical trait, one of the few things we did share. It meant, according to him, that we were both smart. The more I think about the godlike quality of this feature, the more I understand my stepfather's high expectations of me. When I was a child, my stepfather fostered my interest in architecture and art. At 10, I sat at his big drafting table playing architect. He stood behind me, making encouraging sounds or pointing out how, by moving a wall 3 feet, I could create a more comfortable design. On Sunday drives, we searched out half-finished houses so we could walk through and discuss the architect's features. The whole family went to Chicago to tour the Wright houses. It was as exciting to wander through the graceful homes of Wright's design as it was to visit the huge Chicago Art Museum. Drawing a house plan or sketching, or simply admiring the work of another, art and architecture continue to play a part in my life. I remember my stepfather's preoccupation with the synthesis between form and function, and the way he tried to shape his life. He hoped that he was as gracious as well as efficient. The beautiful and livable houses he designed were far more comfortable than his emotional structure. I learned to fend for myself thanks to his attitudes, and perhaps that shows in my broad forehead. His might have been high, but it was quite narrow. The width of my forehead might correspond to the depth of my heart. I may be critical, but I'm no cynic. I step back to make a final check on the shape of the face before I start to fill in the features. I start with the eyes. those deceptively simple fish-shaped frames that hold the windows to my soul. There's much more to eyes than shape. They don't look real without the creases above the lids, tiny wrinkles, or circles beneath them. I need to color in the pupils, and I take care to capture the glint of light reflected from their surface. Now they look like eyes, even though they aren't finished. Usually, when I spend time searching my eyes in a mirror, I've got big questions on my mind, like, who am I really? Or, why did this terrible thing happen to me? It's different to look without an agenda. When I stare into my own eyes, not even real, only images of reality, I get drawn into myself. Whether or not I started with the question is of no real consequence. I have a feeling of wonder and get a sense that there is something more in this gaze, a substructure that supports my everyday self. Maybe that's why people don't look each other in the eye too often or for too long. Close and prolonged eye contact is revealing. It's something I can only tolerate with those I'm most comfortable with. One of the worst things I remember about being an adolescent was the eye contact demanded by parents when I was being lectured. The hysterical diatribes of my mother weren't as uncomfortable as the well-reasoned list of faults delivered by my calm and sarcastic stepfather. For one thing, when my mother began screaming, it didn't matter that she was yelling at me. She didn't look at me, but gestured wildly, caught up in her own private anger. My stepfather not only stared into my eyes as he recited my faults, but reached out to turn my face toward his if I looked away. There was no way to avoid eye contact with him, and no way to avoid the pain his sharp words inflicted. I don't press my children to look at me unless the subject is instructional. Before my son started kindergarten, I gave him the "come straight home and don't talk to strangers" routine. I made sure he looked me in the eye as I spoke. I had to know he understood what I was saying. I add the lashes and pencil in the fine brow hairs. The eyes look finished, and in drawing them I've got the shape of the top of the long bone that starts my nose. I've always disliked drawing noses. They have no strict outlines. Instead, the slopes and curves are suggested by light and shadow. My nose is pointed, the subject of numerous jokes about nose jobs in the lottery by my sister. It figures that my nose goes along with the rest of my pointy features. My long pointed nose, like that of the busybody, pokes itself into the lives of others. I'm curious about why other people are the way they are. What motivates them? What qualities create success or failure? I question myself as intently as I do others. That vigorous seeking is one of my survival techniques. Curiously, I pay as much attention to the drawing of the nose. It's as though I try to define what's below the surface of the skin. My mouth is the only soft feature on my face, and I want to be sure to draw in the many times I've smiled and laughed with my sister, the many times I've cried alone. I want to include all the times I've mouthed "I love you" to my children. I don't want my portrait to look too serious, so I smile at myself in the mirror. I've developed a set of deep smile lines, and it seems important to recreate these grooves with my pencil. I'm a smiler. I've spent a lot of time with this drawing, reinventing the shapes in my face. Just as my pencil has the power to create, so do I have the power to determine the shape of my life. As I choose to put away my angry life, I'm learning the worth of love and understanding in my life. I choose to smile. The end. I could turn into a real ham, Mom. Lake show. Oh no, the other fat shows. Okay, let's see. I'll turn into a vein ham. Turn it off, Ma.